Good evening, everyone. My name is Patrick Murphy, president of Berkshire Test Prep. Welcome to our webinar, The Ultimate Primer for College Admissions Testing. We have a couple goals tonight. We'll discuss the landscape of college admissions testing. We'll do a high-level look at the SAT versus the ACT, with some steps that students can take to help them decide the best option for them, as well as when to take the exams. Finally, we'll look at some ways to prep for the test. Just to touch on how standardized testing fits into the college admissions process, this is a survey done by NACAC, which is the National Association of College Admissions Counselors. They do this survey every year where they reach out to college admissions teams to get a feel for various factors that can go into the college application and what percent are being ranked as having considerable or moderate importance. These surveys are done annually. And every year, the same number one factor that colleges are looking at is students' performance in grades in their courses, day in and day out performance with grades. And as you can see, the most recent survey, the admissions test scores, SAT, ACT, came in third, and right behind it is the strength of curriculum, which is the rigor of the school courses that the student took. Did students challenge themselves? Did they take advantage of the opportunities presented to them during their high school career? But the application review is really a holistic review. So schools will still read counselor and teacher recommendations as well as essays. The reason for the holistic review is they're trying to get to know the applicant as a person and not just a number. So they'll look beyond the grades and the standardized test scores when reviewing the applicants. When we talk with families, we try to reduce the stress around standardized test scores as it is not the be-all, end-all of the application process, but part of an overall process. To help families and students determine the best course of action, we start with a testing plan. By having a plan, we take a lot of the stress out of preparing for standardized testing. The plan consists of 3 basic questions that sophomores and juniors should be asking themselves. Should I take the SAT or ACT? When should I take it? And how should I prepare for it? Believe it or not, the vast majority of students go into these tests completely cold. In other words, they do not put any prep into it. These are national tests with millions of students taking it every year. So if we can help families and students answer these questions, it improves their chances that they'll not go into the test cold. They'll know what to expect on the test and will, in the end, put their best foot forward. The SAT was started in 1926, and it was originally known as the Scholastic Aptitude Test. It held various names over subsequent years and is now known simply as the SAT. It's owned and operated by the College Board, a private nonprofit organization, and the test is administered by the Educational Testing Services. So if you're a student, if you're going to go in and register for the ACT or for the SAT, you have to go to the collegeboard.org website and open up an account there. You can do that for free, and then that way you can register for tests and get your scores. The ACT, originally an abbreviation of American College Testing, is a standardized test first introduced in 1959 by an Iowa professor as a competitor to the SAT. It's currently administered by ACT, a nonprofit organization of the same name. And just like the SAT, you would have to go to act.org to register to take any ACT test. This is to highlight the fact that both tests are accepted equally by colleges throughout the country. No colleges see one test as superior test and one as an inferior test. And, families still sometimes have biases around this. So we sometimes get the question, do colleges really accept both equally? And the answer is a resounding yes. Historically, the SAT was typically an East Coast, West Coast thing, while the ACT was historically taken by students in the Midwest. But that landscape has totally changed. As you can see here, prior to 2010, a majority of students took the SAT, but starting at around 2012, the number of ACT test takers exceeded the number of SAT test takers annually until this past year. In 2016, the SAT revamped the test, and that saw an increase of number of students taking the test on an annual basis. 70 to 80% of students score equally well on both tests. So when there's not a scoring bias, then it's more of a gut feeling that students have. Sometimes we ask the question, which test did you hate the least? Here's a quick comparison of the two. SAT is considered a power test. It's harder reading, a little bit trickier questions, a little bit of misdirection found on the SAT as compared to the ACT. As far as the ACT, reading is a little bit more straightforward. Questions are a little bit more direct, but the difficulty comes in from the pace of it. It's an incredibly fast-paced test. Students feel more rushed when taking the ACT as compared to the SAT. Now, we'll get into more detail highlighting the differences. The essay is optional, as we see here, and is a totally standalone score. It's not factored into the SAT total score or the ACT composite. We recommend that students write the essay on the first test they take to get it out of the way. The fact is, very few schools recommend or require the essay. But we don't want our seniors to find themselves applying to a school that requires it or recommends it, and then they find themselves having to retake the full test to get the essay section completed. The exception to this is if you're applying to any University of California schools or UC schools. In that case, we recommend they write the essay on every test they take. The reason being is the UC schools don't superscore, so we want to make sure that every score being submitted to them includes an essay. To highlight the amount of time spent on each question and the speed versus power between the SAT and ACT, we can see that you have roughly 40% more time on SAT questions. On a section-to-section comparison, the English, writing, and language section of the ACT and SAT will each have passages to read and then a series of questions after. The ACT has 5 passages, each of which is accompanied by 15 questions. The passages are 300 to 350 words long, and they're consistent in quality with those written by high school juniors or seniors, and cover a wide range of topics and tones. And you have basically 9 minutes per passage, or 36 seconds per question. The SAT has 4 passages with 11 questions each. The passages are 400 to 450 words long and range in complexity from grades 9 and 10 to early college. You'll roughly have 8 minutes and 45 seconds per passage, or 48 seconds to answer each question. The main difference between the SAT and ACT reading section is the time. The SAT reading section is 65 minutes long, contains 5 passages, including 1 extremely difficult passage. And quite frankly, it might be intimidating to someone that doesn't know what to expect. It's the first section of the SAT. It's a 5-passage, 65-minute long section. And that's in contrast, the ACT reading section is basically half the time with 4 passages. As far as math is concerned, the SAT has 2 separate sections. The first one is a 25-minute, no calculator, 20-question section, which includes 5 questions that are not multiple choice. So you've got to figure out the equation and write the answer. It also has a 55-minute calculator. You can use a calculator section. That's got 38 questions, 8 questions of which are not multiple choice. The ACT, on the other hand, has 1 section. It's 60 minutes, 60 questions. You can use a calculator. They're all multiple choice. From a content standpoint, algebra dominates the SAT with about 62% of the questions. Geometry plays a bigger role in the ACT. In addition, SAT tests more math in the context of word problems, which is about 53%, while 36% of the ACT is contextual, the rest being conceptual in nature. The ACT has a dedicated science section that is 35 minutes long. It contains 7 passages and 40 questions. The biggest issue with this section is timing, which gives you about 5 minutes per passage and 53 seconds per question. It's the last section of the ACT, and kids may be a little bit worn down by the time they start this section. You rarely have to have knowledge of specific scientific concepts, but you need to be able to interpret data, read charts and graphs, and really be able to navigate mazes of information to find relevant portions, etc. Even though there's no dedicated science test on the ACT, there are still 21 science-related questions peppered throughout the test. As far as scoring is concerned for the two tests, the ACT composite score is an average of the 4 subject scores. Each section, as well as the composite, are on a scale of 1 to 36. The SAT total score, on the other hand, is a combined score of the reading and writing and math sections. The sections are on a scale of 200 to 800 points each, with a total score on a scale of 400 to 1600. Taking a look at the way the total scores and composite scores are made up, one can surmise that someone who struggles in math might be better suited for the ACT because it only makes up 0.25% of the composite score, where in the SAT, math makes up 50% of the SAT score. As I mentioned super scoring earlier, over 90% of the schools, colleges, universities super score the SAT, which means they're going to cherry pick the highest subsection scores at different administrations of the test and build the best score. For those schools that are super scoring, they won't be playing gotcha. They'll take the best scores and give the student credit for the best super score. Looking at this, this student took 3 tests, March, May, and August. On the reading and writing section, their best score came in August, which moved into the super score. In math, their best score came in the May test. So their super score, overall score is 1290 here. ACT super scoring looks almost identical. A lower percentage of schools are super scoring the ACT. I think we sit around 70% of schools that do so, but we're seeing some major changes going forward. In this case, again, the student took 3 tests. As you can see, the super score consisted of the June English score, the September math score, the April reading score, and then the June science score, giving the student a 31 composite. The major changes that I wanted to talk to you about in the ACT, it was announced on October 8th that the ACT is going to undergo 3 major changes. The first one, starting in September 2020, actually all 3 of these are starting September 2020, students will be able to retake 1 or more single sections on national ACT test dates, but only digitally, no paper retakes. So basically what this means is, instead of a student, in this case, retaking the whole test, the next time after they scored a 33 in reading, they may retake just the English, math, and science section. And then if they take it again from there, or take some sections from there, they might just take the math and science sections. This is pretty significant, and I think it gives the ACT a little bit of a competitive advantage over the SAT. Right now, if you want to improve your scores, you have to take a complete test, and then hopefully the schools super score that. Secondly, test sites will be able to offer both paper tests and digital or online tests starting in September 2020. Right now, all tests administered here in the US are paper tests. So this is a big change. Internationally, starting a year ago, the ACT internationally are all digital, but this is the first time that we're looking at any digital applications or online applications for the test starting in September 2020. And then finally, with only 70% of the schools currently super scoring the ACT, starting next year, the ACT will actually report a student's super score directly to colleges. So those are 3 pretty big changes going on with the ACT. Taking this and other factors into consideration, we can make some general assumptions about which test is better suited for some students. Again, the ACT is a speed test. SAT is a power test. If you look at students that maybe are weak on math and they only want 0.25% of their score to go into the total score, ACT might be a little bit better. Faster readers, students that do under pressure, they're generally the first to finish an exam in school. They might be better suited for the ACT. Students that like to take their time on tests, they're more balanced in their strengths and weaknesses. The SAT may better suit them. One other thing to take into consideration that's not listed here is the SAT is also scored on a curve. So there may be some inconsistencies in scoring from one test to the next. If a student's overall score is higher than normal on a particular section, a section that was considered easy by most standards, then the points per correct answer may be less than what was given on different tests. For example, this has led some students getting a lower score on a section compared to a previous test, even though they answered more questions correctly. Doesn't happen a lot, but it has happened in the past. The ACT has no such discrepancies. If you're a student and you're unsure which test you'd like to take, we recommend that you take a full-length practice test of each one. We'll then sit down with you and your parents, and using the diagnostic score report and concordance tables, we'll identify any scoring biases. And if no scoring bias exists, you'll typically have a gut feeling as to which test you'll prefer. So if unsure, take full-length practice tests on consecutive weekends, and then sit down with us and go through the score reports and concordance tables. I'd be remiss if I didn't touch on subject tests, which may affect a portion of the students we work with. If you remember the NACAC survey at the beginning of my presentation, subject tests were at the very bottom of that list. They're down around 10%. So very few schools look to require the subject test. Here's the 3 that require it: Caltech, Harvey Mudd, and MIT, same as last year. What causes some angst for some students and families are schools on this recommended list. And generally for our students, recommended usually means required. So if you're a high scoring student or a high achieving student who is looking at these schools, we'll generally put subject tests as part of your test prep plan. The other instance when subject tests might end up being part of your plan is when you're looking at a particular degree program or particular colleges within universities. Some of these programs require subject tests. A common example here is Cornell University, where many of its schools require subject tests. Also, where this comes up is in engineering programs. Many engineering programs require math and science subject tests. Subject tests are an hour-long multiple choice test in any of the content areas listed here. You can take up to 3 subject tests at any one sitting. Please keep in mind that you can't take the SAT and subject tests on the same day. Not that you'd want to anyway, it would be up to 7 hours of testing. For schools that require or recommend, unless they specify specific subject tests that they're looking for, it's really up to you to decide which ones you'll be taking and submitting. The schools usually want to see 2 subject tests. Testing plan. Outside of whether to take the SAT or ACT and whether it's necessary to take subject tests, the next step in the plan is to determine when to take them. We encourage families to approach this sensibly. We know academics is the most important thing that colleges are looking at, and we want the emphasis to be on academics. First of all, most students aren't one and done on these tests because they're usually nervous the first time they take it. Most students will hit their peak scores after taking it 2, 3, maybe 4 times, depending on when they started. But once students start taking it more than the scores, more than that, the scores plateau. And really no one wants you spending more time than necessary on this endeavor. We want you to be focused on other things during this time, not just standardized testing. That's why when we look at testing plans, we want one that's sensible and keeps you focused on academics. The other guideline we look at is we usually target late spring junior year or fall senior year and fall senior year because statistically speaking, you hit your peak scores because performance on these tests usually correlate well with age, maturity, and time spent in school. So, we know there's a huge pressure out there for early and often testing. Keep testing, testing, testing. But statistically speaking, students tend to do better if they wait. For most kids, taking the test later and starting later is a more appropriate and sensible plan. So this is kind of our ideal testing plan, knowing this not may fit for every one of you. But it's a point in which to start the conversation, especially if we start that conversation early enough. It's never too early to look at this and to at least have a general understanding of the timing involved. For sophomores, if they think that they might have some selective schools, and if you're a sophomore and you might have some selective schools on your list, but you don't always know. Sometimes a June subject test for sophomores can be appropriate. And then we emphasize diagnostic testing over the summer between sophomore and junior years. Doesn't necessarily mean we're going to start test prep over the summer, but we want you to come in, if you can, to take an SAT and ACT test, then go through the diagnostic to see what path you might take between the two tests. Junior year, you obviously have the PSAT in October of your junior year. This is where the pairing of tests kind of come in. We favor February, April ACTs, or if you're taking the SAT, March and May, and the June subject test as needed. The June ACT is also an option, but the end of junior year can be difficult for you, as you might have a lot of exams that you're studying for, AP exams, June subject test, and then if you add a June ACT, they might be a little bit too much. The goal is to be done with testing by the end of your junior year, but knowing we have fall senior year if needed, which kind of takes the pressure off. This gives you a little bit better visual of, the year that the student's in, the months and the tests that are done each one of these months. We're seeing more and more rising seniors are taking advantage of the summer testing dates, including those. Including the subject test dates, the ACT in July, and the SAT in August. A couple reasons are that sometimes you're burned out by the end of your junior year in the testing of all the testing, including AP exams. Also, taking subject tests in August might come up as some of you might start finalizing your list of colleges. And you didn't think you needed subject tests, but these schools ended up being on your list, so you'll need to take the subject test. From a test prep perspective, we recommend 12 sessions, each 90 minutes long to start at least 12 weeks before sitting for the ACT or SAT. This gives the student 18 hours of one-on-one in-person tutoring at our office here in Issaquah. This also gives a minimum of 3 full-length practice tests. The first practice test sets the baseline score for test prep, and we utilize diagnostic score reports throughout to help customize the tutoring for those areas that need the most attention. So in this case, if you're looking at the April ACT, you should have the first ACT practice test done by at least Saturday, January 11th. Your first session would be that weekend or the following week. And then we'd work progressively through each session, each practice test, until your last practice test is the Saturday before the April 4th ACT, and your last session will be the week of when you sit for the test. Same for the SAT. We have the dates that if you start with a full package of 12 sessions, when you should take the practice test and when your sessions should start. Foundations of test prep. The way our books are designed and our curriculum's designed, we have 3 major areas that we kind of focus on. One is content, just knowing what is on the test. And I think that our books do a really good job of laying out the content and giving students practice mastering that content. The other strategy is to game plan for every question in every section. And I think our books do a great job of outlining and walking students through that strategy. And then the last leg, of course, is practice tests, which we've talked about many times. For someone that does their full package, again, they get 3 full-length practice tests. We also use sections and questions from other practice tests for homework or during one-on-one sessions. Finally, this is a breakdown of our services. We offer free full-length practice tests most Saturdays throughout the year and on Wednesdays during the summer months of July and August. You can go to our website to register for a free practice test and you'll get reminders. Tests start at 9 a.m. on Saturday mornings and you're usually out of there by noon. We offer full diagnostic score reports and consultation for $50. Basically, it's a 9-page in-depth diagnostic of the actual practice test. And we could sit down with you and your parents and go through that. And that looks at every question on the test, shows which questions you got wrong, identifies areas of content that you might be struggling in, and that can be focused on for test prep, whether you do self prep or you work with us on test prep. Our full package is 12 sessions, each 90 minutes long, for $2,100. You get a total of 18 hours of one-on-one instruction. We also offer 3 session packages for $540. Sometimes we have some students that will come to us. Maybe they've already taken 1 test and they did bad on math, so they want to come in and get some help with math. So we might do a 3-session package before they sit for the next test. Others are coming in and they're about to take the first test, and we get maybe 3 or 6 sessions in, and then we get the remaining sessions in before they sit for the test a second time. So we're very flexible with how we work our packages. Really, every student's a little bit different, but if you get ahead of the curve, if you come to us early enough, we can work out that 12 session package and get you started in enough time that you get everything done before you sit for the test for the first time. If you have any questions, here is my email. If you go to our website, we also have some links to some tips that are very helpful.